says, there's two sweet canaries going to sit beside that old hen. Oh, he was a fierce man.
He was in the Wellington Hall having arranged a women's meeting. And at that time, the Wellington Hall, well shoehorned in, could have held 1,200, 1,300 people. And Nicholson, in his own inimitable way, on the platform, said, "Hands up, any of you women that are not using powder and paint." And two old dears away at the back of the hall stood up and put their hands up. And Nicholson says, "Sit down, you two. God knows yous need it."
But as well as being shockingly outspoken in the pulpit, to the surprise of those who perhaps didn't understand his unorthodox methods, he could be even more shocking if he felt the situation called for it.
I remember hearing him preach one night against Orangemen in that place at Hall. And the head of the Orange Order in that area was an Elam man, Pentecostalist, and he got up and rebuked him. And boy, he cleaned him, and he made the men carry him out, and they carried the wee man out, kicking and shouting. Oh, he says, "You're not fit to walk the quarter deck yet. You're a deckhand. Out."
And if there were no stewards able or willing to eject troublemakers, WP would do the job himself.
This boy got up and started to shout and yell at him and ran up and down. So he said to the people, he says, "Open your hymn books at the hymn, There's Power in the Blood. And while you are singing that hymn, I'll deal with this man." And he went down, he caught the man by the throat, and he ran him down the church and opened the door, and they heard the bump of the boy on the steps, and the door slammed. And Nicholson came up then, and the woman, as she passed, "Oh, you're not God's man. Our Lord wouldn't have done a thing like that." So he got into the pulpit and he says, "As I was coming back," he says, "a certain female who thought she knew everything, she says, I wasn't like my Lord." He says, "Certainly not." "See, if the Lord had been here, he'd have cast the devil out of the man. I couldn't. So I did the next best thing. I cast the devil out in the man as well."
The other side of that coin was the humour, the witty remarks, the cocking a snoot at the establishment, the highlighting of someone's dress or appearance, and the leg pulling.
Two girl pilgrims attending one of his meetings, and they were wearing their uniform, the bonnet, as they would have worn in those days, and he saw them in the service and he invited them up to do something, and he brought them to the pulpit. I don't know what he was asking them to do, but he looked at the two girls and he jokingly said, "Look at them, aren't they beautiful? And they've never been kissed in their lives." And after that, I don't think one girl worker in the Faith Mission would ever go to his missions wearing the bonnet in case they would be embarrassed again. But he did that on one occasion, I do know.
And he wasn't averse to using a joke at someone else's expense to further the cause. The biggest employers in Comber, County Down, were the Andrews family, who had flax spinning and flour milling operations. One night during Nicholson's mission in the town, Miss Andrews came into the meeting just as it was about to begin. WP was conducting the singing. The place was packed. There was barely a seat. Miss Andrews, resplendent in her stunning white fur coat, was ushered right up to the front. As she approached the platform, WP stopped the singing, looked down at two rather soberly dressed gentlemen below him, and called out, "Would you two penguins move over a bit and make a bit of room for that polar bear?" Well, of course, next day the word went round the factory among the mill girls. Come and hear the man who called the boss's daughter a polar bear. And they did, in droves.
Some thought he was, some of his sayings would have been on the verge of being vulgar. But I believe that God used him as he was. I believe anybody else that tried to be W.P. Nicholson would have been destroyed. But I believe it is God's man for the hour, that he was unique.
and God used him mightily.
One of the secrets of his successful ministry was to announce the night previous what he was going to speak on the following night. And he had said, I want to talk about your lovely wee daughter, and butter wouldn't melt in her gob. If you come tomorrow night, I will talk about her. And the next night, church was packed, and these two dear ladies came in, possibly a better upper class, in fur coats, and sat down in the midst of the church. Nicholson got up and he said, now your wee darling daughter is possibly dancing in some dance hall with some boyo rubbing her belly up against him. Well, it was crude, uncouth, ungentlemanly language. And these two ladies, probably stating that they were ladies, got up and started to stomp out of the church. Offended, completely offended. He waited until they got down to the exit door. And then he said, get along with you, two old grizzly bears. I trumped on your corns.
He really was funny. Because I can remember as a boy, I mean, he made you laugh, but just like that. He could just bring the whole message. You know, it's like a boy said one time, the gospel, he said, you know, you make them laugh and then you drop the pill in. Well, he had the knack of making people laugh, but then he brought a reverence. And there was a solemnity, there was a mighty solemnity about those meetings.
He preached the gospel in the language of the shipyard. And he was coarse. And in fact, he was called the vulgar evangelist. But that was a ploy of Nicholson to get the ear of the multitude. And when he got the ear of the multitude, all the laughing and carry on was over. He got down to preach, and when he got down to preach, he preached. He really preached with power, with a great anointing of God.
I wonder how many here tonight, and that very same word has gone out regarding them. Again and again on the verge of repentance and believing, again and again near the kingdom and almost persuaded, and yet turning back from it. Your day of grace is ended. You're sure of doom and damnation as if you're already in hell. It's a terrible thing, dear friend.
And it was this anointed preaching which so transformed the lives of thousands. One such convert was the father of Irish missionary Stanley Mawhinney, who attended a Nicholson mission in Carrickfergus in the early 1920s.
People had travelled from far and near to hear this mighty servant of God. On one particular night, my father arrived very early at the church in order to gain admission. Others, however, had done the same thing, and as the crowd pressed into the building, part of the railings in front of the church were completely flattened. Jesus once said, the kingdom of heaven suffereth violence, and the violent take it by force. That was true on that occasion, and my father was one of many who entered the kingdom of heaven that night.
Years later, Stanley Mawhinney found himself in Killadece, County Fermanagh, where WP was conducting another mission and in need of a pianist.
The pianist hadn't arrived when the meeting was due to begin, and no one made a move to help when the preacher asked for volunteers. Shame on you all, WP roared. Surely there's someone here who is able to play a piano. I shuffled uneasily in my seat and then decided to respond.
The offer of help was well received by WP, and as Stanley settled himself at the keyboard, WP proceeded to teach the words of a chorus.
I knew the words, for I'd learned them in Sunday school, but I wasn't very sure of the tune. As I couldn't find a music book and had a problem playing by ear, I had to make an instant decision, and so I reasoned like this. As WP would be teaching the words of the chorus,